can't do it.
Okay.
We'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. F it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
Here we go. It is a fabulous Friday, March 14th, the Daily Puck Drop. We appreciate you checking in, whether you're watching live on YouTube, on Twitter. Thank you very much. Of course, you can always listen to the Daily Puck Drop live, by the way. Download the Puck Sports mobile app, iOS store for you iPhone users, the Google Play Store for you Android users there as well. Puck Sports mobile app. Listen to the show live, on the move, on the go. Also good for Apple CarPlay. And if you are watching it live, you can always watch it later. When you go to YouTube, Puck Sports, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment there as well. And, of course, we're on every podcast platform as well. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube Music, whatever your favorite podcast platform is. And, of course, you can find everything at pucksports.com. We are broadcasting from the Puck Sports Studios. It's built by Limback Lumber Contractors. They got free deliveries, everything from whole house packages to homeowner DIY projects. Largest stock moldings in the Northwest. Old school service. They've been doing it since 1930. Give them a call. 206-782-3487. Visit them online at limbacklumber.com. Follow the show on all the social media platforms. Puck Sports on Twitter and Blue Sky. Also on Instagram. TikTok, we put all our clips up there. Puck_sports as well. And when you go to pucksports.com, sign up, become a member of the Pucks Posse. Just $5 a month. You get a discount if you sign up for a year. If you are watching the show, you can you can click on that QR code and we'll take you right there. But just go to pucksports.com. Pretty easy. Top of the webpage will take you to the membership sign up. You get all the free daily content we do every single day supporting Puck Sports. But in addition to that, you get our full weekly podcast with Ryan Divish of the Seattle Times covering the Mariners. Also, our 7-part series leading up to the NFL Draft with Dane Brugler from The Athletic. And a brand new show that's starting the week of opening day for Mariners baseball that you're going to love. Ladies and gentlemen, we have no Jim Moore, the go-to guy. He's off. He's in Arizona golfing and parading around, drinking, and probably yelling at Jerry DiPoto. So he's out. He normally would be here on a Friday, and his normal appearance will be brought to you by a Clean Streak, professional window and exterior cleaning services, and also the Home Course. There in DuPont, Washington. Go get your next reservation today at thehomecourse.com. Book a tee time today. It's one of the most fabulous golf courses in all of the land. And also, Chris Egan isn't here today. So we had to find replacements for these guys. And I'm going to tell you right now, we have upgraded. We have upgraded immensely today. Bob Condotta will join us later today. We recorded with Condotta earlier today. We'll get the very latest on the Seahawks. We'll talk about DK. Also going to give you a Friday recap, about a 20-minute segment of the 5 minutes of some of the best interviews, 5 minutes each of the best interviews we've done this week. But ladies and gentlemen, we may replace the go-to guy with the Groz father. Dave Grosby, the Groz, is with us here for the next 30 minutes or so with the Kraken hat. Groz, father, how are you, sir?
Thank you, Puck. It's great to be here. Filling in for Jim Moore or just Jim. I just got to pick up Jim.
But you know what? You're not filling in for Jim. You're replacing Jim.
I almost did replace Jim once. Have you told the story? You guys know the story?
No, tell me the story, please.
So this is when I I started at KJR, as you know, then went to Cairo for 3 years, and came back to KJR, and then went back to Cairo. So this is the second time going back to Cairo, and I was at Seattle U, and so they were going to pick up the games there, and they were just starting the station there, so they wanted me to. But I had a conversation with them, and they said, "Show we'll have you do afternoons with Calabro." I said, "Well, what about Jim Moore?" We'll do some of that. So nothing I can do about it. I don't feel good about it, but I can't do anything about it. I'm like, gee, it's too bad. So I kind of thought I might move to another day part, but no, it's not going to go. So cut ahead to about a month. We're 2 weeks ahead of that. We're all set. We're all in. We're having dinner, Calabro, and the guys from the parent office of Bonneville are all there. And so I said, well, probably more the GM says, well, we're excited about the show. And Calabro says, you know what? I don't want to do it. I want to do a show with Jim. I want to keep doing the show with Jim. Groz, it's nothing against you, but we're two alphas, and I'm more comfortable doing it with Jim. And so, I understood this entirely. This is not Jim and the chemistry that they had. Everyone had chemistry with Jim Moore, though. Everyone could sound great with Jim, and Kevin and Jim sounded great. So I understood it. It didn't matter. I was still getting my deal and everything like that. But to see the shocked faces on people there, it's one of those things you never would have expected. Never would have expected in a million years. It was hilarious. It was hilarious, and it was great. It was good for Jim, and you kept that tradition going. Broadcasters who kept Jim Moore alive, kept Jim Moore going. I think that's a good thing. We kind of started with, I'm not gonna say he started with me and Gassis. I'm sure he was on with some of the guys before that, but we had a lot of fun together with him from the get-go. So.
That was the best. That's when you and I have talked about that before, and also with Gas. That's where I was introduced to Jim before that. I would read Jim in the paper, and his go-to guy column was just legendary at the PI. But my most favorite memories was sitting in that old Elliott Avenue studios and just sitting in that update studios listening when he would come on every week, because this. He is the same guy. I remember back then you guys would be talking to him and he would be yelling, Willie, don't do that. He's always chasing after his dog because he'd let his dog off the leash all the time, and he still does it today.
He did a bunch of shows. I remember towards the end there where his daughter was in cross country, I guess.
Yeah.
And so he did a bunch of them like that. He was. There was a glory day of newspaper reporters here, and this is nothing against the current crew because they're all pretty new and we're all figuring out how they are. They're all building up their reservoir. But kind of when I got here, you had Steve Kelly and Art Teal were kind of entrenched, and Wayne Noonan was another columnist then. But then you had these other guys come in too, which was just terrific. And Jim Moore was one of them. John McGrath, another one down in the News Tribune. Don Force was another one down there. You had these incredibly colorful guys. It reminds me of they talk about the Big East, had the colorful coaches. These really colorful guys who were writing columns in this town, and Jim he's fantastic. His stuff was just great, and he wrote his column, had that rare ability to write the way he is, and he's a genuine article because he's always the same guy no matter what form. I was amazed to hear you say at the beginning that you have a mobile app. If I told you 10 years ago, Puck, you're gonna have a mobile app, you looked at me like, what's a mobile app? Yeah, you got a mobile app now.
Yeah. It's crazy.
The world is crazy. Yet, you still got some guys who are just cruising through it the same way they always did, and that's Jim Moore.
Yeah, I remember one time. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did one time when he was on, for people who don't remember back in the old KJR days, that Jim Moore would come on once a week and do a hit, and we've kind of talked about that. And again, it's kind of the same stuff. He's at a cross country event, maybe a kid's baseball game. Willie was one of his first dogs. Would be running around. Yep. Did Willie kill something while on the air?
I don't remember. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, though. It didn't happen with me, but that definitely could have happened.
Yeah,
and that would not be a surprise if that happened.
You guys had so many great, colorful guests that would come on once a week. You talk about.
Well, I think we lucked out. McGrath was another guy too. McGrath was one in a million. He wrote out of bars. He had thrown out of restaurants, and stuff. I've been told to keep my voice down. Yes, it's a library or something like that. We used his off the cuff lines to promote his show. So yeah, he was great. We had a lot of we all talk about. Everyone's tired of talking about 30 years ago and that run in the 90s. But you just Mike Holmgren, Lou Piniella, George Karl. You're winning 60 games in the NBA every year. The Mariners are just they're the biggest star in sports probably at this point in time. And they're starting to win too. It was just an amazing period of time. And then, like I said, all those writers, all those guys we mentioned, I think were probably working then. So on free papers when he still had the newspapers going, it was something. But now, man, it's a different world for most of us. But not you. You've jumped ahead.
Well, you
should have heard yourself at the beginning, man. You should have heard yourself.
I trust
it's
me.
Just motoring through all these things that you are now. You're a conglomerate. I'm like, how does he find the time to do this? I'm remembering, like going to work 15 minutes early. I tell the producer, I'll be fine, just gonna ad lib, and we'll do the show. And I don't know how you guys do it, man.
Well, it's
Awesome.
it's the similar way. I mean, I model it after what you did, and to a degree for sure. I don't like the planning out and sending, this is here are the bullet points, what we're talking about today, and pre-show meetings, and you say this, I say that. It's
that's why I was I think in a way that's why I was the hardest partner to work with. I should say, although we don't have any problems with anyone, but I drive Stelton crazy. I mean, Rockstar Bob, who is very, very set in some ways. Yeah. But I just told him at the beginning, I said, look, I don't believe in talking about what we're going to talk about before the show. I don't even want to tell you what I'm going to bring up, as a matter of fact. And sometimes that was a big mistake, but often it didn't matter. It was something new. It's what you brought in, and it forced you to listen. It forced you to be engaged in a conversation. If you didn't do a whole lot of, write 20 questions down. I mean, that was always the dumbest thing to do, I thought, in a circumstance like that. When I asked one thing and then listen and let the interview go where it goes, or the conversation, with whoever you're talking to. So, I know that frustrated the hell out of a lot of those guys, because I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell you. Hugh Millen, my God, Hugh did. Hugh. I mean, I did that quarterback show. I had him on for 10 years at least. And I would never tell him what I was going to talk about. Never. And this won't surprise you at all. It never stopped him from asking every single time. Every single time. So what are we going to talk about? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you, man. I'm not going to tell you. Every time. So, definitely different approaches usually. And I know it sounds like what you and I are doing is lazy, but it isn't. And look at all the stuff you're doing now around it. So it's a great career. It's a great career. It's a fun business to be in. If you can,
it's the best.
Yeah,
it really is.
I mean, you're not in radio anymore, though, are you?
No, but it doesn't
still feel like it.
It doesn't feel too dissimilar, though. I mean, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, other than being on video and people seeing you, I think it's kind of the same, really. I mean,
what about the really social part of it? You hear guys say, the athletes, you miss the locker room, so to speak, and we have the 100%. Sports pits. We all have them. That's what we call them. And that was, it was a lot of fun to hang with the guys you were working with.
100%. That's the biggest thing I miss. 100%. I miss just driving into work and then driving. I mean, just the little things, just stuff like that. I mean, you're at home and you talk to people every day, but it's, it's via a video and you're not seeing people for sure. But what made it a little bit easier, it would have been more difficult if it were like back in the day when we all worked together, in 351 and in terms of where that was where everyone was there all day long.
That's right.
Since COVID, last 5 years, no one was in the building.
Right.
No one was there. So it wasn't, you weren't going there to see anyone because no one was there.
That's the fine line for everything, of course, but certainly in the radio business, it was dramatically that.
Yeah, I mean, salespeople weren't there. You couldn't do your lap around
the
building
aren't.
To see people.
Right, which is the most fun thing of all to do.
Exactly.
So what did you want me to?
I don't know.
You just wanted me to fill time.
No, I don't want you to fill time. What I want you to tell me what that was this last week. I mean, in Seattle sports is one thing, but for the Seahawks, I mean, that is a hell of a lot of change. What these guys have done here in the last week. I would ask you, is it? What do you think of it? Is it good? Are they better? Or are they going to be worse? Or are they going to be the same?
Depends on what you think. I mean, 10-game winners last year, right?
Yeah.
And you let the quarterback go, who everyone concedes was playing behind maybe one of the worst offensive lines in football. 3 years he's been a starter. Would we agree with that? One of the 3 or 4 worst offensive lines in football. 3 different offensive coordinators, one of whom is not even in the league anymore. And he, went to the, I think, 2-time Pro Bowler and threw for over 4,000 yards a couple of times. And we didn't think he was good, or we thought someone could do better behind that line with those circumstances. I mean, I look at it now, and I see Sam Darnold, and he was nothing. I mean, really wasn't until he got into a good situation, because he is a professional at this point in his career. He played 6-7 years. He'd been around. He knew what it took to be good, and how to grab an opportunity. And you look at that Minnesota. That's the thing that's really stuck with me is you look at the play caller you had there, one of the best in the league. You had Jefferson, one of the best receiver probably in the league. You had a great offensive line. You had a great running game. You had everything. A lot of not all of them, but a lot of quarterbacks could have probably taken Minnesota to a 13 or 14 win season last year. And I don't know if I look at the Seahawks and I think, look at those new numbers that I normally hate being an old dupper, but I love them in football. They seem to be they make more sense to me in football for some reason. The baseball ones I can't get, but the football ones I get a little bit.
Okay.
I think it's just, Geno Smith was so accurate when it counted. I mean, he was accurate on long passes. He was really positive things in most categories. I understand the stuff that was obvious, the interceptions and the things that happened. But, these are things that happen because I'd say 75% of the time, at least, because the line was terrible. So, we'll see. The Raiders are going to might be better on the line, might not be. I don't know. We'll see what Geno Smith does. But, I mean, I think that people weren't giving him enough credit for doing what he was doing behind the line that he was doing it from.
And I agree with that. And then the one thing we get into this offseason again, and listen, I like them acquiring Sam Darnold. I'm a fan of it. I didn't want to pay Geno Smith. I didn't want to see them pay Geno Smith as much money as that he wanted, especially at his age. And, Mike Garafolo from the NFL Network and I would always do this. He would always asked me the same question every time we talk about Geno. And it's kind of tiresome. But he goes, close your eyes. Do you see him holding up the Lombardi Trophy? And I said, no, I don't. And that's unfair because it feels like it's a major knock on Geno, but I never saw him as a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I'll be honest with you. I don't necessarily see Sam Darnold hosting it either, but you're getting a guy that at least he's younger, significantly younger, and it's cheaper, and you're not committed to him for a very long time. But the same problem still exists that you just detailed about Geno on the offensive line. They
didn't get a better offensive line. Forget it.
No, they haven't done anything to it yet. They haven't improved it.
No, in years, and it's just a personal thing probably, but it's an old Jimmy Johnson line. Back when I was a big time Cowboy fan, I like Jimmy Johnson, and I loved his line about I'll pay the guys on offense. I want guys looking for contracts on defense. I want them playing to get paid, and I think that was always stuck with me. You can't do it every time, but philosophically, you spend the money on second and third contracts with offensive players. Defensive guys you bring in, we've seen it here, haven't we? Every great defense we've seen here has started off with guys in circumstances like that. You start with Lofa Tatupu if you want to, going back to Holmgren's first Super Bowl team,
sure.
And playing right away. And see, when you go up to the Legion of Boom, Sherman was on their second year. I mean, Chancellor was in there right away. You had those young guys wanting to get paid, quote unquote. And I see him bringing in older guys on the defense, younger guys on the offense. We'll see about Sam Darnold. I'm not saying he can't be good. I'm just saying I think Geno Smith was a lot better than he was the last couple of years, considering the circumstance that he was in. And when Darnold was in a circumstance like that, he wasn't productive at all. Now, you're right. It may just mean that Geno, that's his top level. He may not get past that. Yeah. But I don't know, man. I mean, if they get enough weapons around him in Miami, with the Raiders, he's probably got a year or two left in him. But that would be it, of course. Darnold would hope to win on the long run.
But why do you think? I mean, John Schneider's a smart guy, right? We all acknowledge that, and he's done a lot of good. And I know he talked to guys yesterday, and he understands where they're deficient at with the offensive line. But why? I just wonder why it's been such a struggle for them to acquire talent either via free agency or consistently in the draft. And here's the thing. I don't knock him in the draft because they have drafted guys, a lot of guys, but they just they can't nail them. They cannot nail those guys in the draft. I mean, I think Lucas and Cross have been a success, but one just, has had some issues with staying healthy. But if they're both healthy, they're good tackles. But
they were great draft picks. So it was a great idea. Let's get our tackles taken care of. And I mean, that's the funny thing is when they had their great success, their offensive line was fantastic.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. So I mean, they know this. But that's why I kind of go back to, well, then take the sure thing. If you're going to get an interior lineman, make sure you get one who can play. Don't run the risk of him being shitty. Get a guy who's proven for in there, because that stuff we know now matters. We've always known it matters a whole hell of a lot. I'm baffled by some of the moves they've made. The Mark Lawrence move. I mean, 33 years old, played 4 games last year. Immediately gets into a beef with one of his ex-teammates. I think he's a good player and everything, but this just doesn't feel great.
Okay. All right.
Okay, I'll just throw it at you that way. So I think the Seahawks have had a rough offseason, in my opinion.
You don't like it. Do you
No,
think it's
no.
been all right.
I think the quarterback is the biggest mistake they've made in years.
Oh, so you don't like Darnold at all?
I think he totally. I think he actually had a great team around him, and then actually at the end of it, when they needed him to do something, he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So no, I'm going to say that he still hasn't proved anything to me, except he can produce numbers on a great team, which I think a lot of guys can do in this league.
Hey, Groz, what happens here? What happens here in the next year or two? Let's say they take a step back. They don't get any better. A year, 2 years from now, are we talking about a new president, new GM?
Oh man, I think in that circumstance, yes, it's probably the move you make, and it's only because, in my opinion, it's not like you've been doing this every 2 or 3 years. And this is a guy who's been your man for 16 years now. I would also argue the other side, as I always can on everything, that look, you've been winning with this guy for the most part. He'll get tired of winning. It's one of my favorite lines, and they've won more under him than anyone they've ever had. So, I think it's a difficult choice to make, but you don't want to get trapped in the cycle, which is what unfortunately they're in that right now, I think. But trapped in the cycle ultimately comes down to finding a quarterback in this league that you win with. If you don't find it, we see what happens to teams. They grind through everyone. So the quarterback is a big issue. It's a big issue for them. And if Darnold is not what he was with the Vikings last year, without having that great play caller, without having those great, I don't know who he's going to throw the ball to, without having almost all of the things, and under a new offensive coordinator, we'll see. We'll see. If he's good, man, he's better than I thought he was.
Yeah. Let's flip it over on the other side, the other GM in town.
54%.
Jesus, man! He just every time he talks, I just wonder, does he just not know how to shut up and give up some politically correct answer, whether he's lying or not? I know we always ask for being truthful and honesty and transparency.
It's not true. It's not true. We can't.
But he says stuff like he did the recent interview with the Athletic, and he's just talking about. Well, people, just didn't understand the 54% comment again. He's putting it back on fans. I would just say this to him. He's had 10 years, and he's done some good stuff, though, right? He has. But, how much longer does this fan base need to wait for these guys to actually win something?
The thing that comes to mind is, is this the issue everyone's talking about? Is it ownership or is it management? Oh. And, I like John Stanton a lot personally. So, let me just say that a lot personally. I think he's a great guy, and he's a great guy, and he cares about the team and all that. But that's the question you got to ask, because this is the franchise that has been the least successful franchise probably in all of professional sports, and they're continuing to be that right now. So, has Stanton provided enough money for them to be better than they've been? Well, yes, of course he has. So has it been all bad? Moves by the Poto? No, but a lot of it has been. You know what? Puckett takes a certain kind of, I don't call it skill, but a certain kind of things to happen, a confluence of things to happen, to be this bad for this long, to be in the playoffs 4 times in 45 years, despite cycling through all these kinds of things. It's more than just bad luck with this franchise. You start to think that it's beyond that, because I look at it and I think, what? They really blew it the last 2 years. I was I didn't give a rip one way or the other about the Poto. Was one very good with the Angels, was okay here, but they did put together this great pitching staff and had it. And then you realize this is the time now. You can make a move with a fan base that loves baseball like this one does, and we know this living here that we do. People don't realize, if you haven't been around here, how great a baseball town this is when they're going right. Imagine if you just given the fans. Pick a guy, one of the great free agent hitters that have been around the last 2 or 3 years, and add him to the team. The kind of buzz you get for that. When you have the Mariner fan base, which is famously and justifiably pessimistic about stuff, I think it explodes for something like that. I think it goes crazy, and it probably works too because you need more offense. But just to make a move like that buys you such goodwill, and instead to point out 54%, then say, well, people still don't understand. That's the thing about that. I don't care what he's saying, but don't tell me I don't understand when you're running a 500 club. Just don't tell me that. That's not what I want to hear from you. I want to hear that, it's really simple. It's a simple game. And I'm talking about dealing with the media, and he doesn't do it that well, Puck. He doesn't do it that well.
He's terrible.
And
He's terrible at. But I guess I would. I guess the frustration is always, for me is with the ownership, and I don't know. It's interesting because Jim will say the same thing about John. And he likes him personally. I don't know him personally like you guys, and I don't doubt that internally that he wants to win, and I know that he's a baseball fan. But what I think the problem with them is he's the face of the organization, right? He's the face of the ownership.
Very good point, Buck.
But
Very
he's
good point.
But he's not the main money guy. I mean, Chris Larson's the main money guy.
Right.
They have all these owners. I mean, there's so many of them. What they desperately need is one person who is, the billionaire who controls it all and signs off on it.
You're right. You're exactly right. I mean, that's a very, very good point to make about Stanton, about what they're doing there. But, it's just, they've got a great example in their sister team, right? The San Diego Padres. We've always joked about that because they're down there with them. But look what the Padres have done the last couple of years. In a market that's smaller than Seattle's for sure. They're kind of, really, and the Dodgers going nuts, 40 miles north of them? You've got nothing but your area, it seems like, in the desert to draw fans from, and they have decided to spend money because they know that no matter what happens when the guy sells the franchise, he's going to make 5 times, 6 times what he did. That's when you make your money. So you're going to even afford to lose $50, $60, $70 million a year. I'm going to make my money at the end. In the meantime, I'm going to sign every fucking player I can sign out there. I'm going to get every guy I can because I'm going to be on everyone, and people are going to come to the games for that reason. Even if we don't win, we're going to buy some goodwill for that reason. I mean, that's correct. That's correct. So why not try that up here? I mean, that's what really, really bums me out about it. You really had a chance to just, when they did Robinson Cano when they really didn't need to, when they needed a lot of other stuff, but it was to make a statement about being willing to spend money. It was the biggest contract in the league at that point. They needed to bring in someone the last 2 years, an impact name. They needed to. And instead to not do it both years, it's just, it's more than just, when you're a fan of the team, liking when things are going well. It sucks the joy out of the offseason from you. It puts you in a negative vibe all the way through. So, I mean, you're not going to believe it to the very end that they're actually going to win. So you don't even enjoy the season because you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because you're waiting for something bad to happen. I mean, that's
because it always does.
Yeah, I know it does. And that's what's so frustrating with them is that everybody that is a baseball fan and a Mariners fan knows how close they are to being winning the whole thing. That pitching staff can defeat anyone.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. But, this is a franchise that when they had a Hall of Fame caliber manager in Lou Piniella, won 116 games, had Ken Griffey, Randy Johnson, Alex Rodriguez, and didn't win the World Series, didn't even get to the World Series.
I know.
How can that be? Tino Martinez?
It's cursed. There's a curse on the team.
You look at the team that they had back then. They couldn't even make it to the World Series. So yeah, they might be working against powers that we don't understand because it's just been such a tough road. But I really felt that they missed the opportunity of completely changing the vibe, if nothing else, by signing a big name guy.
What they have not done and kind of the aura around them. Does it impact your love for the game as we're 13, 14 days away? Do you still get as excited as you always have for the baseball season, for the Mariners season?
For the Mariners season, probably not. Baseball, yes.
Okay.
And I dropped my Mariner TV thing last year. I haven't decided I'm going to pick it up yet because I think that another issue. But I'm still loving baseball. But no, I'm kind of frustrated by the whole thing. Yeah. To this point, I really kind of, and I get set in my ways. This, Puck. I'm still pissed off that the Sonics left.
Well, geez.
I still don't like the NBA. I still don't watch the NBA. I don't want it to come back. I mean, I hold a grudge, I suppose.
But don't you think you'll change your tune if they do come back?
No.
Really?
I do not. The NBA, I just don't. I don't. I mean, we'll see. 5, 6 years, I won't see him come back anyway. I'll have shuffled off this mortal coil by the time they come back. I will have shuffled off this mortal coil by the time they come back.
I don't want to end on that note.
No. They're not coming back, buddy. They're not coming back.
God, if they don't come back, that's going to be. That's my favorite team. That's just my
it
favorite team.
Nothing was more fun than running with those guys when the NBA was flying high. When you had Sean Kemp and Gary Payton, it was nothing like that. I agree with you, but you don't have. It's not like that anymore.
I know.
It's not like that anymore.
Well, hopefully
we just need the hockey team to catch on. Speaking of
Yeah,
things,
there you go.
they actually, I think they're going to do what I predicted in the prediction show. Make a big change at the end of this year.
Another one?
No, they're going to bring in a name. I think is what I said. Bring in someone, a major personality, a major entity, will join the Kraken in this offseason.
Okay,
Will become a new focus for them.
That's right. We did.
They needed it.
Groz and I and Danny O'Neill did Mitch's prediction show on his podcast, Mitch Unfiltered, which we predict everything that will happen in the next calendar year. So we'll listen back to it. When did we do that? A month and a half ago?
Yeah, we never listened. That's the key to my having my winning streaks. We never listened to it. Tapes are destroyed to protect the innocent.
But you've already won. You won the Super Bowl. You picked the Eagles. I think I picked the Ravens.
You did, but to beat the Eagles, so it
to beat
bad.
The Eagles, yeah. And I can't remember anything else. But I
said Geno wouldn't be the starting quarterback. I said he had injured.
Yeah, that doesn't count. That doesn't. You don't get a point for that.
Sure, I do. He's not the quarterback.
Yeah, but you said it was for injury.
But he's not the quarterback. See, we can do this back and forth forever. This is another reason why you win. Hey, man, this was a blast.
This was a blast, man. You're the best. Thanks for doing it. Let's do it again in the future. Be well. People love you. God, the comments are, my God. What are you doing next Friday? We'll kick Jim out for his Friday appearances. All right?
Jim, you know what? Jim would actually like that.
He would. I'm not 100%. He'd be like, I'm done anyways. I love you. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, buddy. Thank you.
There he is. The Groz father. Dave Grosby. Follow him on Twitter at the Groz, filling in for Jim Moore, who couldn't be with us today. He's down there with his kids in Scottsdale, going to spring training. Again, Jim's weekly appearance that was now done by the Groz, brought to you by Clean Streak Professional Window and Exterior Cleaning Services. Big thanks to Brian Turner and the Home Course, fabulous golf course in DuPont, Washington. You want to play one of the best, if not the best golf course in the state, go check out the Home Course and book your next tee time. All right, earlier this morning, because he had stuff to do, and I want to make sure nothing new has broken on Cooper Kupp, because if I play this and there's a Cooper Kupp news, I'm going to be real angry. Bob Condotta stopped by for a visit. I haven't had Bob on this show since we tried to do the live draft show last year with Bob, and that was a disaster. But we got things smoothed out. Wanted to get Bob back on to talk about what, again, has been just a crazy week for Seahawks football. He's been covering the Seahawks for a long time. He does such an excellent job of covering this team. No one, honestly, works harder at their craft in covering any team as a beat reporter than Bob Condotta. So we caught up with Bob earlier today, talked about the trades of DK, Geno, the addition there of Sam Darnold, and will this team ever address the offensive line? Look at this. This is a real treat. We've got a rock star, a superstar who covers your Seattle Seahawks. Ladies and gentlemen, from the world-renowned Seattle Times, been covering the Seahawks forever. Put your hands together for Bobby C. Bob Condotta. Bob, welcome. How are you, sir?
Good, Jason. How you doing? Yeah, long time no see.
Yeah, it's been great. Last time we did this, I remember, was that in the draft, and there was some problems. But listen, we are much better now. So I'm glad that you're on the show, and I want to break. There's so much to talk about. You've been covering the team for a long time. You've been covering Seattle sports for a long time. I guess specifically with the Seahawks, you ever covered something like that in the last week of so much news coming down?
I mean, the day I kind of wrote a little thing about this or referenced this was the day they cut both, or the day they traded Russell Wilson and traded Bobby Wagner. It was obviously a day. No, I mean, this is that was insane, having all that happen as quickly as it did. And you know, I think everybody who covered the team, everybody followed the team closely, knew the Tyler Lockett thing was going to happen. So I remember I was prepared on Wednesday, kind of had some stories ready to go and things like that. And kind of just thought, well, that's Wednesday. You know, and then within like a half hour, the news about DK Metcalf breaks. And from there, the rest of the week was the rest of the week was crazy. And every time you thought that, I guess Friday's done or whatever, you know, the Geno Smith thing happened at about 4:30 on Friday. And I think they're the same way. You know, I think for things happening that they weren't expecting. I don't think they were really expecting, put it this way, I don't think a month ago for sure they were expecting all this to happen. I think over the last week, few weeks, they had gotten some vibes with some of these, but no, I mean, and just when you just look at the kind of that's basically taking off what were your top three. I'm pretty sure your top three cap hits last year. Probably, maybe your three best known players that you had. That kind of turnover is rare for any team kind of ever, and to have it all happen really in the span of about 55 hours probably from when they officially cut Tyler Lockett when they traded Geno Smith is definitely a pretty cataclysmic thing.
What if anything, Bob, surprised you about both trades of Geno and DK?
I mean, initially that they happened. The DK one, obviously, a lot less. The Geno one, maybe I know maybe you can get accused of believing these guys too much. I just did sort of buy the idea that Geno was coming back. I thought you looked around and a lot of that was time when you didn't know, like, if Sam Darnold was going to be available. I do think that's an important thing. John Schneider, I think, basically referenced that as well. When Sam Darnold became available and they knew he was out there, it made it easier for them to go quickly, like, yeah, I guess we should just trade Geno because someone will take him. There's a team that wants him, and and we're at loggerheads with him, and we don't know what his future is going to be. So we better up and do that. And I think they learned that a little bit from the Russell Wilson trade, where I think they probably regret some ways that they didn't do that earlier. I'm not surprised. Like, in terms of what they got back, I'm not super surprised, because I think both those are situations where I think sometimes you take out when you try to assess the value of what they're going to get, you forget how much those guys are already making, and teams have to make that financial investment in them too now. So like in DK's case, they immediately signed into a huge deal that makes him basically the third highest paid receiver in NFL history, basically, since the salaries keep going up. And then in Geno's case, they're going to have to commit to the same. And, so that it's that part of it that I think you can sometimes forget when you're like, wow, they couldn't get more for DK or whatever. But you're finding a team that can do both at the same time to give you something back and to agree to that trade with him in DK's case. And in Geno's case, kind of similarly, really, if you put him on the open market, any team was going to have that. Well, are we going to be able to re-sign him? In the case of the Raiders, obviously, because Pete's there, they feel pretty comfortable that'll happen. It hasn't happened yet, and that's they inherited that contract. So Geno's that $16 million roster bonus now comes due for the Raiders here in a few days. So they're going to have to figure that out. But they're just always, it's always just kind of I sort of had just thought they would work something out with Geno and that he would sign. The DK thing surprised me much less. I just, the timing makes sense because, again, if you're going to do that, you do it now so that you can then, like they did, sign some guys in free agency with what they did with MVS and they're pursuing Cooper Kupp. If you wait, you don't have that ability to sign the same kind of guys at free agency. So I think that's why they left as quickly as they did in that situation. But still, 2 months ago, I hadn't thought that these guys weren't going to be part of the team this year.
What happened with the DK and the Seahawks relationship? It is very odd, and Schneider yesterday with you guys, I think, shed a little bit of some light into it, but then not too much, and his answer was, well, you'll have to talk to him about it. Do you have any idea, any indication what just happened and why that relationship soured?
I think ultimately it was, I mean, sadly, maybe often in these cases, it's money. I don't know that they were going to want to pay him the contract that the Steelers did. So I think that's probably the biggest breakdown. And, being able to find, when they knew the Steelers were going to pay that, I think that for sure meant, yeah, he wants out. And, so I think that was the biggest thing. He hit a sign to it. I was going to try to write a little more about this at some point. It's just been so dizzying the last few days to get to every thought you have. But, the last time with the Seahawks, he had signed a shorter duration. He signed a 3-year contract. And the thought was, part of that was because he wanted to hit free agency at this stage. I think they always thought he was going to want to hit free agency. He was going to want to see what was out there for him. And I think he I think he really wanted to do that, and so I think more than the relationship frame with Seattle, I think he maybe wanted to just see what else was out there for him. And, a lot of these guys kind of want to do that when they hit a certain stage, and you want to feel wanted again, maybe. And, there is sort of that baggage you kind of have, DK had played here 6 years, sort of your legacy is set. It begins to be set a little bit in terms of what you've done. And, he's always battling these perceptions of the things that had happened in the past. I think, maybe he just wanted a fresh start a little bit. But I think the money is a big thing, too. I don't think the Seahawks were going to agree to that kind of a contract. So I think if maybe, he's got one of the bigger agencies out there who really know the landscape well. Guys who represent guys on every single team and know every single GM. So I think maybe his agents as well had an idea like, look, there are some teams out here that we know that would be interested in paying you that, even if the Seahawks aren't. So I don't know if there was any specific fraying of the relationship at all. In terms of the organization or DK, I think it was more just DK kind of hitting a stage of his career where maybe he just wanted to see what else was out there for him. And when he realized there could be something out there, again, in this case, that was going to make him far richer than I think the Seahawks were probably going to be willing to do. I think that helped lead to this.
Again, I'm going to ask you to speculate, but with speculation, usually from you comes some detailed background information on some of these details. Why do you think Geno Smith and his camp never countered what the Seahawks offered? Do you think they just looked at it and said, "No, I mean this is so far apart, we'll never get close to that"? I think that one is a little stranger to me. I will admit that one. And maybe if Geno gets asked that when he has a press conference down there, maybe he would shed some light on it. Probably not. I think guys generally kind of move on. But that one's a little stranger to me. And I think that one caught the Seahawks off guard a little more. And again, I think that's why this happened as quickly as it did, because I think they thought, I think they were, like I said, caught off guard by that. And I think they had not having a ton of time to really decide what this meant and is this something that's going to get worked out. They decided, as John said 3 or 4 times, to pivot quickly here with the free agency time coming up. And you were only going to have that you were only going to have last Monday, basically, to get Sam Darnold if you wanted to do that. So you were going to have to move quickly if that was the move you were going to make. But it's just another one where I think just maybe Geno wanted out, and maybe in this case, since it is the Raider, it is Pete Carroll, he knows that he's going to value me. They will value me at a different level than the Seahawks would. They obviously are going to now. They're more invested in him to make that work financially more at the level he might want, because they did just trade for him, and they don't have another option now, basically, since that's their big move to go do that. So they can't probably trade for Geno Smith and then have contract talks break down, and a year from now they're going after another contract. So I do know that all along I think Geno really wanted a lot of money, and I think he probably wanted a little bit more than the Seahawks thought. And maybe he just, decided to force the issue quickly here and really play hardball as opposed to the last couple times. But, this Geno admitted to, when we asked him about it, that he wanted the team to do this last year, or he wanted an extension last year, which was, I think he knew and his people knew, because again, he works with people who work with the Seahawks a lot. Basically works for, the same agency that had Michael Bennett and the Trufant family and all kinds of guys. Marshawn Lynch. So, guys who've negotiated contracts with the Seahawks a lot, and kind of know the they do have a lot of relationship there. But my point there. So from last year, the Seahawks don't ever give contracts with give extensions with more than a year remaining. And Geno had 2 last year, and they asked anyway and got told, no, we're going to stick to that. So this had been going on for a little while in terms of Geno kind of, I think, being unhappy with his contract situation. And so I think some of it was just that again as well. I think he feels like he's deserving of,
My understanding was they offered him basically about a 2-year, $90 million deal, 40 to 45. I'm always reluctant sometimes to throw those out because you don't know what the details were. So you don't know if it's that, but a lot of it was incentives or whatever money that's maybe, the guarantee's not super high. Everybody will always tell you the real number to look at is the guarantee. And, I don't have any idea what that was, but maybe he wants in that 50, 55 range. If you're Geno Smith, you could certainly look at Trevor Lawrence and the contract he got and go, I've got a better track record than Trevor Lawrence does. So why am I not making what Trevor Lawrence is? But if you're the Seahawks, you're probably not going to pay Geno Smith at this stage of his career $57 million a year. So I really just think it was money in Geno's case. And I think it was probably him just sort of deciding I've got a better chance of getting this somewhere else.
What do you make of the Sam Darnold move? I mean, financially, it's not a big commitment. Years-wise, not a big commitment. They can still pivot and draft a quarterback if they want. To me, it seems like a win-win if he's the guy that you saw for the first, 15 games of the season or something like that. It's a good deal, maybe opposed to what you saw the last two. But what do you make of the Sam Darnold signing?
Yeah, another one where I think we all assume the contract is one of these that's really just sort of a 2-year and you can easily get out of it in the third year. So so you're basically making a 2-year commitment in Sam Darnold, right in the prime years of his career. I mean, coming off what appears to be a turnaround year, but not right now, right in the years when 27, 28 years old, where you should be getting the best of him for sure. So I think it makes exactly. You can definitely go get a quarterback. I think you could sell getting a quarterback pretty high, really. So if you want to go get Jackson Dart or whatever, I think you could. I think I don't get the sense that's something that would probably upset things here the way it might have. And when Russell Wilson was around, they weren't going to take a quarterback super high and come be the backup for all the obvious reasons. But I think you could do that now. A little bit higher of a pick anyway. So I don't think it rules that out if it's something that's there. Darnold, it's amazing when you look at, he was just sitting there languishing in Carolina with appearing to have already hit like journeyman NFL status, for 2 years. And then especially with the 49ers where he was an afterthought. I mean, I can remember, watching 49ers games that year and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that's right. Sam Darnold's their backup, when you're covering those games. And I'm being somewhat facetious there, but obviously I knew that. But still, you'd be like, yeah, that's Sam Darnold's their backup. This guy was the, having, the same as you, watching a lot of Pac-12 football in that day. I watched a lot of Sam Darnold's games at USC. So, I thought this guy was going to be great. And then, and then just he's kind of doing nothing basically for 3 years in the NFL. And then last year comes, seems to come out of nowhere and have that year he had. And when you watched him, against the Seahawks, it looked like the real deal to me. I mean, he looked really good in that game. The Seahawks, they thought they played really well defensively in that game. And I think they thought they only made a few mistakes really. And one of them, Darnold capitalized on hugely at the end of the game, when he saw Justin Jefferson break open briefly down the field, made that play that won the game. And that's the kind of things Darnold was doing for the Vikings all year. So, I know the last 2 games last year were pretty rocky, but that overall track record up until then was pretty good. And, I think it's worth the gamble for the Seahawks. And again, in Geno Smith's case, you were going to have to pay, he was already under contract for year 35. So you're paying for years 36, 37. He did get banged up a little bit last year. That doesn't get better as you get older. Your ability to bounce back from injuries doesn't improve when you start hitting your late 30s. So I think there were some things like that, which are why the Seahawks were going to be reluctant, a little more reluctant to maybe give him the kind of contract he really wanted. I think in the case of Sam Darnold, John said he was at the top of their list, and I believe him, given what that list is. I think he was their top guy of what was available in free agency this year. And so, moving aggressively to get him, I think you do give the Seahawks credit for that. Of like, look, this probably wasn't going to work out with Geno. We do have to move fast here because the other thing to remember with Sam is they do have. Clint Kubiak's worked with him, but there's about 5 other guys on the staff that have, like Ivan Lewis, their strength and conditioning guy was at USC when Darnold was there. Some things like that. There's some guys, there's 4 or 5 other guys on the staff who have worked with him. So they did kind of get that, they not being able to bring him in for a visit or whatever, but they did have a lot of guys who know him. And so I think they feel comfortable from that standpoint too, like that this isn't a guy we're going to hand a lot of money to, and then we have to worry about, his work ethic or whatever coming forward. So, certainly it'll be an interesting couple years to see how this unfolds for sure. But I do think he's good enough with the defense they're putting together, to win 9 or 10 games at least next year if they can continue to do some things with the offensive line and replenish the receiver core a little bit too, and then see what happens with all that.
All right, so the last thing for you, which is like the topic that burns everybody in this town. It's another offseason where they have been reluctant and at this point have neglected addressing the offensive line. Now, they're every year there's a bunch of different factors. This year could be, hey, we wanted to get our eyes on Will Fries to see where he was at with his physical. But to this point, they've signed one who is a backup offensive lineman. What is their reluctancy of going, I guess, quote, all in on some of these offensive linemen? Is it just simply just a philosophy and they will never change that philosophy, Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is a little bit more just individual circumstances than sometimes than overall philosophy. Like, we're just not going to go after offensive linemen. I do think every year they get and they look at these guys and they just set their own market for each of these individual guys. And then I think that was John Schneider's kind of infamous comment about guards get overpaid. That's what I think was trying to get at, is that it's not like guards aren't worth anything. It's that teams tend to keep, like Trey Smith with the Chiefs. Everybody was hoping Trey Smith would hit free agency, but because good guards are hard to find, the Chiefs franchise tagged him. He was one of only 2 players who was franchise tagged this year. So teams tend to try to keep their best offensive linemen. The offensive linemen generally who hit the market are guys who hit the market for reasons. And I think that what John was trying to say with that is there tend to be so few good offensive linemen that people think are really worth a lot of money that hit the market, that a lot of times these guys that in their view anyway, these guys get paid more than what they think their market value really is, because teams are like, there's only 2 or 3 of these guys out there, so we're going to have to overpay to get one of them. And I just think the Seahawks in general have tried to resist doing that. They've never been a big player in free agency really anyway. They did for Draymond Jones a couple years ago. That experience isn't going to convince them to go spend more in free agency. That didn't really work out. They prefer the Leonard Williams model of, let's trade for a guy, we get him in, we see how good he really is, then we'll pay him a lot of money when he hits free agency. They've always preferred to do that. So I think some of it is their overall free agency philosophy and then what they feel with offensive linemen. But in this case, by all accounts this year, they were willing to go pretty heavy on Will Fries, but they did want to see him. They did want to give him the physical, and that just became the non-starter. So my understanding, I know there's maybe some conflicting thoughts on that out there, but my understanding is that became a non-starter early enough in negotiations. It never became if you just match or whatever. Like, they weren't in it. They didn't stay in it long enough because that became a deal breaker to then match the final deal he got. So whether they would have been willing to go that high, I think is an unknown question. The rest of the market, I don't know how great people think it is. There aren't a ton of guys who've been getting a lot of money on some of these things, but it did just break. Adam Schefter just reported that they are going to bring Tevin Jenkins in for a visit Monday. And so he's a guy who, is kind of one of the top names out there. And, there's kind of some questions with him of why did the Bears just want to keep him? The Bears have really remade their offensive line. So that's always the thing with free agents, is there's kind of always that, why didn't his other team just want to keep him? Basically, that you always have to battle with somewhat on some of these guys. So, I think they're going to bring him in for a visit and kind of get to know him better and see what they want to do there. I do think they'll try to do some things. But the other thing with this year specifically is I do think they placed values on all these guys. And I think they, especially once they made the trades and knew they had the 10 draft picks and 5 in the top 92, they were balancing that against what they think they can get logically in the draft as well. And so I do think they'll go heavily after offensive linemen in the draft. And having 10 picks and having 5 that quickly, it wouldn't surprise me. Again, not knowing for sure what they're going to do the rest of the way free agency. But as of today, let's say, if they use, say, two of those picks in the top 92 on interior offensive linemen and really tried to attack it that way, because I do think there are what are viewed as some really good interior offensive linemen available in the draft. And, from a cost control standpoint, that's always your better way to go if you can make it work. If you can draft a Pro Bowler and then you've got him, at a rookie deal salary for 4 or 5 years, that's your better way to go. So that's what they've spent a lot of draft picks on offensive linemen in the last few years. It's just, unfortunately, some of them haven't hit as well as they needed to.
I lied. I got one more thing for you, real quick. Cooper Kupp. What are you hearing on the Cooper Kupp front?
They definitely are interested in him and would like to get him. I know that that's another one where Cooper Kupp was making about $26 million a year with the Rams. I think people were really unsure what his market was going to be given his age and injury status, and it sounds like Cooper Kupp would like his market to be the same or near the same as it's always been. And I think I think for some teams that's an issue. And so I think there's been more of a waiting game here. My understanding was people thought this would happen really fast. When he got cut Wednesday at 1, that became official that maybe he would sign with somebody by, he could have physically signed at that point, that he could have signed with somebody really quickly. And, now as of Friday morning, it's still, there's reports it's down to Dallas and the Seahawks are reported as maybe the top 2 teams for him. I know the Athletic reported that. I haven't heard the other teams as much, but I just have heard that the Seahawks are definitely interested. But again, if he wants $25 million still, as he was getting $25 million plus as he was getting from the Rams, I don't think the Seahawks are going to want to do that. So I think that's where it comes down to. But they're hoping that they and Jake Peets, they've got a guy who worked with him and what is essentially the same kind of system. Similar, there's a lot of similarities, not the same, but a lot of similarities in what they do scheme wise. And I think they think Cooper Kupp would fit in really well. And then there's kind of the home state angle a little bit. I don't know how much Cooper Kupp cares about that or not for sure, but I'm sure it's got to be a little bit of a tug to be able to play, a couple hours from home.
He's one of the best in the business. He's been kind with his time. He does a great job and has covered the Seahawks for years, the Huskies for years. He knows everything about Washington and Seattle sports. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Condotta. Follow him on Twitter at @bcondotta and go read all of his work at seattletimes.com. Go get yourself a hard copy. It's always best read. Getting a little ink on your fingertips. Bob, appreciate it. Thanks for joining us. And, of course, you can catch this episode up on YouTube. Just follow Puck Sports when you're there. Subscribe and leave a comment. Also, of course, on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify. Again, pucksports.com is always a great way to follow there as well. Thanks, Bob. We'll talk down the line.
Okay, thanks, Jason. All right, anytime.
Big thanks again to Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times for joining us. And thank God we recorded that earlier this morning, and fingers crossed nothing broke there on the Seahawks front there with Cooper Kupp. Nothing happened as of yet. There still are some rumors out there. Kupp and the Seahawks potentially on, there's been other teams there as well. But the Seahawks have been mentioned as one of the teams after Cooper Kupp. But again, the asking price, we had this yesterday with Garafolo. Asking price is pretty high. We're talking, again, we don't have the guaranteed money, but we start getting into per year, which certainly could change some things, but $16 million. And, I'll repeat what we said yesterday that, I like Cooper Kupp at a cost. I'm not going to break the bank there for him. We had this during the interview there with Condotta that free agent guard Tevin Jenkins, who started 14 games last year for the Bears, is scheduled to visit the Seahawks coming up on Monday. So, hey, at least they're bringing in a body to at least have someone, a veteran there on the offensive line. Hey, a new thing I was going to do since Jim was not here and Egan's not here, I thought it was a suggestion of taking a piece, a portion, 5 minutes or so of some of the best stuff that we've done this week, and then kind of give you a 20-minute recap in case you missed it of some of the most important stuff in shows and podcasts that we did this week. So I took 5 minutes from Ryan Divish as we talked all things Mariners, culture, where they're at right now with Dan Wilson in his first full year. Michael-Shawn Dugar of The Athletic, talking about what he called the ignorance of this organization not addressing the offensive line. Rob Staton and I kind of going back and forth, disagreeing on that offensive line. And then Mike Garafolo from yesterday as he gave you in-depth details why the Seattle Seahawks did not bring Geno Smith back. It was pretty clear-cut why they decided not to do so. So here is a 20 minutes Friday recap. Ryan Divish, Michael-Shawn Dugar, Rob Staton, and Mike Garafolo. Do you see a noticeable difference with Dan Wilson compared to Scott Service and his regime?
Well, there's there's less meetings. I think like Service did a lot of team building meetings, every day, you do the introductions, they have all the kind of the fun stuff. And I think that was something they, I don't know if he forced upon, but that was just they had a lot of meetings. They do a daily meeting here, but it's not as long. They don't do all that kind of stuff. Now Adam Ray, the comedian, is here, and he's going in today to like roast the team. And so that should be amusing. But Service did all the goofy stuff. They had the band, the mariachi band one time. They had like players do their talent shows and stuff like that. They haven't had that. And I think sometimes, that could feel forced for some players who are more old school. And I think also there was a tension last year at times, because Scott didn't have an extension. And I think there was an urgency that you could feel a little bit. And then they also talked about winning the West last year and all that stuff. Dan doesn't have that problem. When your name is in the Hall of Fame for the thing, you don't worry. Honestly, if they didn't make the playoffs this year and they decided to fire Jerry, they're not firing Dan. They're just not. And whoever wanted to be the GM would have to inherit Dan. He's going to go out on his own terms. So I think in that regard, I think there's a level of confidence Dan has because he's been with this organization so long and he knows that they're not going to mistreat him. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, I do think there's an ease, and then the hitting aspect of it is different because last year you had Brant Brown, you had Jared DeHart. There was a lot more of the technical, what are we searching for? Look at this, look at that. Whereas they've really simplified a lot of this stuff this year in terms of up the middle and everything else. And it's not like that wasn't preached by Tommy Joseph and the hitting coaches before. It's just it's who's preaching it. And also it helps that the star center fielder has kind of bought into it more than maybe he did a year ago and has meshed better with the hitting coach than, with Edgar. There's just a good relationship between those two. And, I think Bobby Magianis, the assistant hitting coach, Latin guy as well, that helps. You have a lot of Latin players on this team, a lot of Latin hitters, and they kind of have all embraced that, and so it's just a very simple approach. It's just hey, hit the ball hard up the middle, battle more with 2 strikes. We're not gonna overemphasize certain pitches to hit or certain locations. We trust you as hitters. We trust you to develop your approach. We're not gonna force you to try and buy this approach that we want you to have. We want you to have a simple overall approach, and then we'll work within the means of it. And I think, that's been good because sometimes you can get over flooded with information. I talked to Haniger about it because he loves the information. He said, it's simple, but it can be you can make it as complicated as you want. If you want to get all the data, we have all the data. He goes, they'll give it to you, whatever. But the overall mindset is, hey, here's what you do well. Let's try and do this more. Let's stay up the middle more, and let's be better with 2 strikes and better situationally. And we've seen that. And I think, that doesn't mean that's going to happen all the time in the big leagues. But if the overall mindset is that day in and day out and your best players are buying into it, then you can't be an asshole at the plate and be selfish when your best players are doing it. That's kind of the way you look at it. It's this team and the way they play and the kind of guys they have, Cal and JP, and now even Julio on some levels, are just not going to put up with guys that don't kind of buy into what they want. You either start to fit in real quick or you'll be ostracized and you'll probably be gone, within a year. And I do give the previous regime, with Scott and stuff, when they recognized guys that were issues and they didn't keep them. They didn't try, if guy can't be fixed, and then they moved on from him. So I think that's the biggest thing is there's a simplification of what they're trying to do at the plate, and will that work? who knows? I mean, we saw it for 6 weeks, sort of, but again, like small sample size as well. So I think everything we've seen says it should be better. But again, you don't know what happens to a hitter once they struggle. Like, that's the problem that happened last year, was all these guys struggled at once, and some of them couldn't figure out how to get out of it.
I don't know how you could watch Sam's last game that we've all seen Sam play and say, let's just develop the guys we have, maybe take a rookie, and Sam will be okay. That is stupid. That's ignorant. I don't care how highly you think of Christian Haynes, Saltawa, Anthony Bradford. They might even be fine players. I would cross my fingers on Haynes, maybe, of the group in this scheme. But you just can't watch Sam's last game and not go all in on trying to fix that. You know, all in to a point, I guess I should say, because I can understand the 5-year thing being a holdup on Will Fries. Yeah, outside of that, you just can't watch that. That Sam was back there getting his ass kicked right up the gut. How you got to do something about that, because that'll be your fate, Seattle, if you don't do something different. You see what Minnesota did after that?
Yeah, for sure. They just that's all they did was improve their offensive line, especially in the middle. What did you make of
D-line too?
Yeah, D-line. What did you make of the Sam Darnold signing? Yes, like it? No.
No, I don't like it because of the infrastructure that he's coming into. If the Dolphins had signed Sam Darnold, I'd be like, oh, okay, I can see that. The weapons you got, you know, the scheme, whatever, I could see that. So
it's not necessarily the player; it's the situation he's coming into.
Yeah, because honestly, Puck, once you get outside of like the top 5 or 6 quarterbacks, scheme and support is everything. Okay. That includes like even a Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts is not scheme proof. There were some schemes where he would look like Sam Darnold, because he has deficiencies as a quarterback, particularly as a passer, which is really alarming. And we see that even in the scheme he's in. His own guys complained about his passing.
Do you like the deal, though? Because it's not like they committed a bunch of money to him or years. I mean, it's pretty friendly.
Nah, I don't think the deal matters. I think that cost effectiveness only matters around now. But if Sam has a bad game, no one's going to care that he's on a bridge quarterback. They're going to be angry that he threw a pick. They're going to be angry that he took sacks. The same thing with Geno.
But that's
Geno was on team-friendly deals, Puck, and you know it didn't stop nobody from criticizing him in the red zone.
But that's fans, though, from like an organizational standpoint. If it doesn't work out, what did they lose?
If it doesn't work out, it'll probably be A, because they didn't support him well, and B, because they downgraded their quarterback. 2 active decisions that I'm like, all right, well, I just don't trust you guys anymore. Because I do trust Sam to, like, the best of Sam. And I watched some Sam film over the last, like, week. The best of Sam, Puck, is really, really, really good. It's really good. His best throws, like him on the move, he can move really well. Great athlete, throws on the run, great. It looks great. But what it takes to get that out of him, I don't believe in Seattle to deliver. And I think Geno was making something out of nothing more than people realize. And Sam did a lot of nothing towards the end with a whole lot of something around him. And now you're just flip-flopping. And I think that's the worst thing you could possibly do, is take someone who needs a lot of support and put him in Seattle. Seattle's been one of the least QB-friendly situations for quite some time. It quite literally drove the last quarterback out of here. Is that the perception that they were not quarterback friendly with their scheme and their O-line? And now you're dropping Sam in that. I just don't see that going well without investing a lot more.
But it seems
in
like
what's around Sam.
But it seems like at least this system is very quarterback friendly. At least that's the perception of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. From the line of scrimmage stuff, with the quarterback traditionally does not do. So that's part of it. You're just trying to get him to play fast and not think. You're getting a lot of play action. Sam was one of the highest play action quarterbacks in the league last year. He and Derek Carr, I think, were right there in the top 10. So that makes sense with Clint Kubiak. The scheme is quarterback friendly for sure. That's how you can see Spencer Rattler throwing bombs to Marquez Valdez-Scantling in week 12 or whatever. Like, you can operate, anyone can operate in theory, but that's for like a game or two. You know, like it can also be shut down. I've seen this scheme just not be able to move the ball, like have games with 3 points, 6 points, you know, routinely, multiple teams. Even just look at Clint Kubiak's Saints last year. Everyone points to their injuries happening in like week 4 or whatever. Go watch week 3. They couldn't move the ball on the Eagles. I think they scored like 12 points, and that was with everyone healthy at home. You know, before the Eagles defense really turned it around. That scheme can be stopped if you don't got the Jimmies and Joes. And I don't consider Sam one of those Jimmies and Joes. I think he's a decent player. But also the worst of Sam is worse than anything we've ever seen from Geno. The worst of Sam is bad, real bad. And it's kind of like what we saw in that playoff game. And I'm afraid that the Seattle's infrastructure will lead to more of that than his Green Bay game in Week 16, which was really good.
We're butting heads a little bit on the offensive line thing.
No, but I don't think it's butting heads. I just would say this. I think it's just from my perspective with fans. I understand the frustration with not being. Maybe it's just because I'm here. I don't know. I don't know if that should have anything to do with it because the internet can reach everywhere now and we're all kind of connected. I just think it's a frustration of one particular position group that for a decade has not been addressed. And free agency starts and we all get excited of reading those two big names, and then they don't even they don't get either of them. And I just think that it would have changed the mood of the fans had they got one of them. And I know, to your point, and I agree, not many people even knew who both of these guys were. But I don't think that's important as much as they knew that people that watched them said that they were the two best players. And so they're like, all right, then we should get one of those guys because we have this massive hole in our interior offensive line. And it's been that way since they traded Max Unger. And it just seems every year we're doing the same thing. And I think on top of that for Seahawks fans here is you have a baseball team where they have this one thing they've got to improve every single year, and that's their offense. And then they don't improve their offense. So you're like, we got baseball season starting. We haven't improved our offense. We got this football team with this offensive line. We still have not improved the offensive line. And I just think it is, I understand the initial wave of criticism. On the same time, and the flip side of it, we talked about this yesterday, and I agree with you that it's not over. There's still guys on that list that they can get. There's still the draft. It's not a finished product at all. It's similar in a way, and we'll get to the Geno trade and Sam Darnold. Similar in a way when everyone for like a day almost panicked when they traded Geno because they were like, oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to like they didn't already have Sam Darnold locked up. I mean, I can just tell you that it was a done deal. Sam Darnold was a done deal when they traded him. They weren't going to trade Geno Smith and then go, well, what are we going to do now? Like, where are we going? So, obviously, they got a plan of what they want to do the offensive line, but I just think that there is not a track record and for this fan base with this particular GM that he can get it right. I think that's fair because he hasn't shown that he's been able to get it right.
Yeah, and there'll be people there that have not pored over the draft prospects and maybe sort of don't understand what's available, short of what they hear watching maybe the main players in the draft world discussing it. But I legitimately think that Gray Zabel is we've talked about it, is a perfect fit for the zone blocking scheme as a guard and a plug and play player. I think what he showed at the combine in terms of his explosive testing was. He hinted at elite potential. I think it's not to say that I get everything right, because clearly I don't. But over the years on the offensive line, it has been, I think it's been somewhat easy to predict who is going to be good. And I think Zabel has got a very good potential to be good, if not great. And Tate Radley's testing numbers, just unbelievable, just absolutely fantastic. And there's an option maybe for round one. There's an option for round two. And that fills me with a lot of confidence, and maybe they take a chance on a Josh Myers. So I do think that there is chance. I still think, I'm not going to give this up. Tyler Booker, I still think can play in his own system. I think the way that he tested, I've put the video on SeahawksDraftBlog.com. I know he tested terribly, but if you watch the video on Seahawks Draft Blog, you will see the guy can move. So I think he still remains an option there. So I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic that they can get a good young line together. They do need to get at least one veteran. And October 2023, Seahawks trade a second-round pick for a rental of Leonard Williams, and he played well. They signed him to an extension in free agency as he approached turning 30 years old. Huge impact on the field last year. I just wonder if one of the things they may consider doing is giving the Bengals a ring for Trey Hendrickson. He is 30 years old. He has 35 sacks in the last 2 seasons, 17 and a half sacks in both of the last 2 seasons. He is one of the elite edge rushers in the league. The Bengals are in a bit of a tough spot because they have to find the money to pay Jamar Chase, the franchise T. Higgins. And there's been talk of maybe it'd take a second round pick. 3 years, 4 years, maybe at a push of Trey Hendrickson producing at the level that he has for the last 3 or 4 years could turn this defense into an elite defense. And you can pay him $30 million a year because you have the cap space to do it. And
because, we talked about this repeatedly, didn't we? About, can you ever, it's the Super Bowl banner test, right? Remember?
Yeah, you do it to me all the time. Sure.
Could you ever look up at the Super Bowl at the banners that they have in the stadium and see Geno Smith? I was actually thinking about that this year. We were in the media center and they had Mahomes and either Saquon or Jalen, but they had him up in this huge banner. Because I was thinking to myself, what do they do with these? Like, do they just throw these banners? Like, how do you throw that banner out after you're done? Do they recycle it? Right. And I was thinking about that. There's so many of these things that they make up for the Super Bowl and they're done in a week. And I was thinking about that. I was like, I tell Puck all the time, here's the test right here. You're at the Super Bowl, you look up, can you see that guy up there? I don't think the answer was ever yes, but he wasn't a bad option in the meantime, right? Like, he was a good option. And if he had asked, or if he had acquiesced to a contract around what they were offering, which is what Sam Darnold eventually got, I believe he'd still be the quarterback of the Seahawks, right? So it just came to a point where they're like, we don't see him as a $45 million a year guy. As a matter of fact, I'm surprised Geno hasn't gotten his deal yet from the Raiders. I thought that was supposed to happen pretty quickly, and maybe it still will in the coming days. We'll see. And it's he's going to a tax-free state in Nevada, so if he gets 40 there, it's comparable to 45. I mean, I'm not doing the math, but 45 in Seattle versus 43 in Vegas might be the same thing. So we'll see what that number comes in at. And it's all a matter of where you are, right? The Raiders are trying to start this thing anew. They needed a quarterback. I am covering multiple teams right now that if they miss out on Aaron Rodgers, who was not a good quarterback last year, if they miss out on Aaron Rodgers, they're going to be in severe trouble. So for the Raiders, it's like somebody else's, I don't say trash, but it's their treasure. They needed something. And in the end, the Seahawks wind up getting a guy who, and I've explained it this way. Let's say the production is equal. Sam Darnold and Geno Smith. You're paying the same amount of money. You also got yourself a third-round pick as well. And in your mind, you might even have a better quarterback, right? Like, you might. So you might have a better quarterback for cheaper, plus a third-round pick. That's why the deal was made.
And they obviously don't make – I'm going to make an assumption here. They don't make that trade for Geno if they don't have a good idea they're getting Sam Darnold.
Oh,
correct?
No. Yes. No, I
because that's actually is that the illegal but legal but before the legal tampering?
No, it's illegal but illegal. That's if no.
So
I'm not saying it happened.
Way.
I'm just saying,
because people are like, well, what if they don't get Sam Darnold? And we were discussing this when I asked to come back on Friday, but we were discussing this on Friday's show, and I'm like, there's just no way they don't know it's Sam Darnold. There's no way they do that deal.
However they did it, the Seahawks were clear that they were going to wind up getting Sam Darnold, and that's a place that he wanted to be. The deal got done. There was – what was the other one that suddenly opened up? What am I missing? There was something that opened up, and I was like, oh, boy, could this potentially fall apart on the Seahawks? And Seattle was where he was.
Lawrence? Like a deal that you didn't think was going to happen?
No. There was something that happened publicly, and I was like, oh, boy, that just opened up. It was Fields going to the Jets, and all of a sudden the Steelers were open, and I knew that was a place.
I got you.
Maybe that's what it was. What it was.
Well,
when Fields Darnold went there, it wasn't done with Darnold yet.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself,
could blow up on him.
Yeah. So because I know Darnold liked Pittsburgh, but he really liked Seattle, and the team, the organization. And the offensive coaching staff is a big part of that too. Okay,
so when they presented, did they present a similar offer they gave Darnold to Geno?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Did he ever counter it?
Yeah. He wanted 45.
He wanted 45.
And they were around 35.
Yeah.
So it was a sizable gap. And in the end, could it have been bridged at 40? Probably. He comes down, they go up. But at that point, it's like, well, we could get this for this number, add a third-round pick to the mix, and And Darnold's much younger too. That's the other thing. I didn't throw in there. His age was certainly a factor as well.
Do you think he gets that? Is it a foregone conclusion he gets that with the Raiders?
I believe that is it a foregone conclusion? In so many words, yeah. Like there's going to be a new deal and it's coming up, and it's going to start with a 4 from my understanding. So we'll see.
Big thanks, and I hope everybody enjoyed that kind of a Friday recap. I thought that we would recap some of the top things that we had going on the show this week. 5 minutes from each. Ryan Divish, full podcast with Divish, by the way, available to you Pucks Posse members. Sign up today. If you're not a member, what are you doing? Come on, $5. That's all it costs. It's a cup of coffee. You spend that every single day. That full podcast with Divish up there for members. You can click on the QR code on your screen if you're watching. If you are listening, just go to pucksports.com, top of the webpage. We'll take you there to sign up. So 5 minutes of Ryan Divish, 5 minutes with Michael-Shawn Dugar, 5 minutes of the back and forth between Rob Staton and I, and then the last 5 minutes there with Mike Garafolo, who, again, just kind of, we were talking there about Geno a lot, and just, listen, it just wasn't going to happen. There was too much, as he said there. He wanted $45 million a year, too much of a sizable gap between those two. He just was never going to come to fruition. There was, the counteroffer was way out of reach, and there you go. And that's the result of it. So hopefully you like that. Maybe we'll do that a little bit more often, just kind of recapping the week of the 5 best minutes from the stuff that we have done throughout the week here on the Daily Puck Drop and Puck Sports. All right, we finish every show up with Hey, What the Puck, ladies and gentlemen, which is brought to you by the world-renowned Restoration One. Boy, they're going to take care of you. It is your restoration company that lets you avoid the stress of water, fire, mold damage with their property restoration services. Kiddos, locally owned and operated. Make them your first call when those damages affect your residential or commercial property. Visit them online, restoration1.com, North Seattle franchise, or give them a call, 206-817-8917. Going back, if you're catching up to the show late, there was no Jim Moore today, no Chris Egan. I'm saying this for the people watching it live. Go back and watch it later. The beginning of the show, we had Dave Grosby on for the first half an hour, and then Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times. And something that Groz said there is he and I are very similar in our personalities. And I asked him, what has transpired this offseason with the Mariners, does it make you less excited about the start of the Mariners season and baseball in general? And I found his answer interesting because it's how I feel. He goes, no, it doesn't affect my interest and love for overall the game of baseball. He and I, we just love the game. But yeah, I'm a little down on the start of the Mariners season. And I agree. Me as well. Unfortunately, just it's the way it is. I just think that they have had off seasons where they could have made this team so much better, and it is so good. And I still think there's a lot to like on this baseball team, and there's part of me that wants to have that glass half full and optimism that some of these guys can work out. But the pessimism in me is going to come through because I'm just so down on what they did this offseason and just disappointed as a Mariners fan. Like many of you are, that they didn't go out and spend more money. So, yeah, is the baseball season close? It's 2 weeks away, and there's going to be a level of excitement. There will be plenty of people that will be on the stands. Probably won't be sold out, but it's going to look pretty close. And I'm going down next week for spring training. So, by the way, we'll be off Wednesday through Friday next week. And so there's a level of excitement to going down there. I'm excited because my kid's excited, my son's excited, and he gets to see, all of his heroes and watch baseball in the sun and all that. But I think is like an excitement for what I think this team can be. I'm setting myself up for disappointment. It's a terrible way to go into the season because I just don't. They just didn't do enough. Didn't do enough to make, I think, a pretty good team really World Series good. And that's hard. So I think Groz and I are in agreement on that one. Excited and love baseball. Can't wait for it to start. But certainly a little downtrodden maybe. Disappointed because your favorite baseball team simply didn't do enough. And it's sad in a way. Sad in a way with all the talent that they have in that pitching staff. Just so much talent. It's an embarrassment of riches what they have. Really is. Despite, the injury there to George Kirby. Hopefully, once the season starts, they surprise us. Polanco comes back strong, and they made the right decision with Ryan Bliss at second base, and Luke Raley rakes at first base, and then it's all forgotten, and we'll quickly all forget, and we'll say, God, they were geniuses. All right, that's Hey What the Puck, again, brought to you by Restoration One in North Seattle, your restoration company that lets you avoid the stress of water, fire, and mold damage with their property restoration services. Locally owned and operated. Make them your first call when those damages affect your residential or commercial property. 206-817-8917. Visit them online at restoration1.com. North Seattle franchise. Big thanks for watching and listening today. Thank you to all our sponsors. Limback Lumber, A Clean Streak, The Home Course, Georgetown Brewery. Go check out their new tavern beer at your local bar. Check it out at the brewery. Visit georgetownbeer.com. And, of course, Restoration One. Today's Daily Puck Drop up on YouTube. When you're there, please subscribe to the channel. Also, find the Daily Puck Drop on your favorite podcast platforms. And, of course, always up at pucksports.com. When you're there at pucksports.com, please sign up, become a member of the Pucks Posse. $5 a month supports all the free content, VIP, and exclusive content we do as well, like our baseball coverage with Ryan Divish. 50 minutes this week from the Seattle Times covering all things Mariners. You get the full boat when you sign up. Also, our continued draft coverage with Dane Brugler of The Athletic. Episode 3 coming out next week. Check it out, all up at pucksports.com. All right. Oh, I didn't do voicemails this week just because I only like doing voicemails when Jim's around. But we got some good ones. So we'll save it for next week. We're not going to be here next week. Well, I'll save it for 2 weeks. All right. Everybody enjoy your weekend. Have a fabulous weekend. Get out, enjoy a little bit of the sun because it's kind of here now and then it's going to go away. I'll be at a baseball tournament all weekend long getting dumped on. So go Sting. All right? Go Sting. We'll talk to you on Monday as always. Promise me better.
No shoes, no dice.
Would anybody like to smoke some pot?
Yeah.
I was born to love you. I was born to lick your face. I was born to rub you. But you were born to rub me first.
What do you need my address for? We'd like to send out a mailer.
Mother of mercy, I don't speak Japanese.